Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. What was a time in your life where this rang true for you? I actually got interviewed by directors who thought that my boss was committing fraud. I said that she was utterly incompetent, but I'd worked for her for years and could not believe that she would commit fraud. Sure enough, she'd just fricked up the books so much that it looked like we lost millions when we actually hadn't. You know what they say, a mistake plus Calivan gets you home by 7. My family was checking into a hotel. We approached a caution floor wet sign. My mom saw a group of old people coming up and moved it out of the way. I put it back, asking what she was doing. She said she wanted to move it aside so it wouldn't be in the way of the old people. I mean, this is completely dependent on whether or not the floor was actually still wet. My former roommate took my vacuum to her boyfriend's without asking. Annoying but fine. Then, she didn't return it by the time we moved out, as I'd requested twice. After splitting up, still in the same city, I asked her to drop it off under my stairs. I live a block away from the metro anytime that week as I was busy at a new job. She says come meet me after work or else I will mail it to you and withhold the mailing costs from the security deposit, which the landlord had returned to her and she was supposed to give to me. Basically ransoming my own vacuum that she stole with money that she was supposed to be returning. I wanted it over so I went to get it from her after work. Yes, she would rather lug it to work and have me lug it home than just take it straight to my house. When I saw her, I was visibly cold because what the heck. We weren't friends, but she was just so rude about the whole thing. Then, a week or two later, I get the deposit check from her in the mail along with a note that questioned why I seemed kind of angry when we last saw each other. I was baffled but then thought about it and obliviousness was truer to her personality than malice. I'm guessing stupidity and never being taught common courtesy was really to blame. Still rude as heck though. Started a new job at the same time as one of my team members. The training was heavily video conference based. Unfortunately, it was incredibly frustrating for me to go through these training sessions with him, because every time I tried to ask the trainer a question he would cut in immediately after I was done asking and add something on that didn't make any sense. This would confuse the trainer, my team member would explain further, the trainer would get further confused, and eventually after a few minutes of this he would say never mind and the trainer would move on. Was this a power move? Was he being disrespectful? Selfish? Sabotage? Number. His English was terrible and his ability to pick up on social cues was even worse. I found that I have to explain that I'm asking a question before I actually ask it, or else he thinks I'm making a statement or adding a non sequitur. At work. Every day, if I can't find something, my go-to and proven technique is to think, okay, if I were dumb, where would I put it? Usually substituting lazy for dumb works as well. I usually say what location would pee me off the most, then I'll look there and usually find it. Works for video games too. I'm in my 4th and final year of college and just like any other university, the financial aid department is the worst. I have been overcharged, undercharged, and double charged more times than I can count. At one point I was asked to pay $3,000 for my flight course fees 2 months after I took out a loan and paid the bill. I ask one of the many people working there, why am I getting this bill? They respond with, we forgot to charge it to your account. They then proceed to tell me that the money is due the 1st of October and they charged me the 29th of September. I told them there is no way I would have $3,000 in 2 days, and the woman proceeded to tell me that if I don't pay I'll be removed from all my classes. I hung up and nearly put my fist through a wall. I felt like it was personal because this kept happening to me. Then I found out my friend was in the same predicament because they screwed up her fees as well. I came to realize it wasn't personal but that the entire staff was completely incompetent and expected me to drop everything I was doing, which in my case was 3 jobs and 18 credit hours, and pay them to fix their constant frick-ups. I ended up having a long chat with their director and magically a scholarship of $3,000 was placed into my account the next day. This doesn't exactly fit the bill, but when I lived on a ship there were several times that I would be missing some personal belonging. I would immediately silently suspect someone was swiping my crap, but it would always turn up in some small corner a day or 2 later. After this happened a few times I learned to curb that negative impulse and assumed it was my natural stupidity. Teacher here. When somebody changes the subject mid-conversation, It's unlikely that they are bored by or don't want to hear what you have to say. It's likely they are so worried they will forget the thing they need to say to you, and they probably aren't that great socially anyways. I have adults and this is very true for me. I'm not trying to be rude, but I most definitely will forget within the next 5 seconds, as I have a non-existent working memory in conversation. I work as a consultant in the IT space, fixing the fuck-ups made by people who don't know the product well, probably have limited IT skills to begin with, and who receive no training from their employers. Almost everything I do is repairing the fallout from people who weren't thinking about how their decisions would affect people and or data in the future. This is basically my job. 2. I feel your pain. A case of rudeness versus obliviousness. I was in a train station and a kid dropped off an empty bottle in a trash can without looking. The bottle hit the lip of the trash can, fell to floor, and bounced around for a bit, making a lot of noise. The kid didn't react at all and just kept walking. I thought it was rude that the kid didn't go back to pick up the bottle. A few minutes later, I saw him with a group of friends using sign language. He never heard the bottle fall to the floor. One of our co-workers was tasked with creating a new corporate identity. Among others, he wanted to use a special font for all written documents, letters, invoices, offers, advertising material. One that would have cost tens of thousands of euro to license, would be impossible to implement with the enterprise software we were using back then, and was basically indistinguishable from one of the standard Windows fonts. A friend of mine was talking and she mentioned she got a new boyfriend. I knew him and told her I thought it was nice, and they fit well. She asked me to elaborate. I said they were both nice and both cared about their work and their personal life a lot, trying to make everything better. She asked if there were any other similarities and I jokingly said physical. She asked what I meant and I said they were both physically fit and they cared about their bodies. She pressed for more details, and I stupidly said you're both kind of girthy, as in they had wide shoulders. I regret everything. TLDR. I told a female friend she was girthy. I think that speaks more to your friend's insecurity rather than your stupidity. I was sleep deprived and frizzled. It was near the end of one of my first shifts as a night manager. I'd been helping the same customers for like 40 minutes. This older guy and his wife, they were both super nice. We'd shared laughs. They'd ended up picking out hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise. Quality customer salesperson interaction the whole way through. I'm bringing them out. Everything's going smoothly. I'm handing the dude his bag, and I start to say have a nice day before realizing that it is very much dark outside. In that moment of indecision, my brain corrected day to life instead of night. Have a nice life, I cheerfully told the customer. His face fell, and he looked at me with a hurt sort of confusion in his eyes. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, then plucked his bag from my hand and marched out the door with his wife. There were other people in line. I didn't have time to explain that I'm not a dickhead, just tired and stupid. Where's Hannon when you need him? What is wrong with have a nice life? It's kinda weird, but not super uncommon, especially if you don't expect to see the same person again. Girlfriend of a friend studied herbal medicine. When I finally got pregnant with my daughter after 2 years of trying, we were ecstatic. Around week 20 of the pregnancy, she told me to drink raspberry leaf tea. Luckily, I was taking a prenatal class where we learned that drinking raspberry leaf tea before week 38 can cause a miscarriage. I was angry at her for years until a mutual friend told me she just barely passed her course in herbal medicine. She didn't know better. Fasipum. Yeah, you're supposed to drink that when you're full term to help you go into labor, not something you want to happen early on. Corollary. Never attribute to stupidity that which can be adequately explained by ignorance. Believe this, and the world becomes a kinder place. Ignorance is curable. This is my personal philosophy and it hasn't failed me yet. It also makes talking about it afterward easier. People hate being blamed for things, but sometimes don't mind being educated from a non-judgmental point of view. When my teacher mentor got pissed at me because I didn't email her my homework after I told her I would, I accidentally sent the email to myself. Friend of mine has been and still is trying to get me into his pyramid scheme. I don't think there's any malice behind it. He just genuinely wants to share the opportunity he thinks he has with me. But, of course, he doesn't really have an opportunity, just a hole to sink my money into. If the joke about buying a boat is that it's a hole in the water you throw money into, the joke about buying into an MLM should be that it's a hole in your life you throw money into. A supervisor of mine reports stats to my team at work. Without getting into what I do, our team is one of 4 in the department. Our stats one month were up to 48% of something the 4 teams share. Different shifts mean different demands for different times of day, so they'll never be equally 25% for that particular stat, but we should be getting like 30% of the load for our shift. Still, we got a pat on the back and a let's make the numbers even higher next month. I don't think she understands basic data stats, regression to the mean in this case. Most people don't seem to understand regression to the mean, unfortunately. I'm a teacher. This is a mindset that helps me get paid at my job. I don't take things personally and it's my job to help people be less stupid so it works out. The other day I was talking with my roommate about the Black Klansman, and next thing I know he was saying, hey man, say what you want about the KKK, but at least they stand for something. In the end I know that he didn't say it meaning to support the KKK, but he was trying to defend the right and the more conservative views, and what came out was the dumbest sentence I have heard. I mean, say what you like about the tenets of National Socialism. Dude, at least it's an ethos. Basically every conversation my father and sister have ever had with one another, they constantly misunderstand each other and misinterpret what they're trying to say, to such a degree that sometimes they go for months thinking they hate each other without ever really considering the possibility that they've just been a little bit ignorant or reckless with their words. Ha, this is one of my rules in life. Didn't realize there was an actual name for it. Well, my rule specifies incompetence instead of stupidity. I know plenty of smart people that are incompetent. Our 8th grade math teacher farmed out the statistical analysis of his sports ball fantasy teams to the class. We all thought he was maliciously trying to get an edge over his competitors when in fact he was too stupid to realize you had to teach to the test back in the No Child Left Behind era. Ends up the ability to compute batting average didn't help us much on those standardized tests and he lost his job as a result. I mean, fantasy sports seemed like it could be a pretty decent real world example as a part of the statistics portion of the course, but there's quite a bit more to math than just this. Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Madcap's addendum. Except in politics, where, for the good of all, the opposite must always be assumed. When someone seeks a position of power, stupidity and ignorance both are inherently malicious. I once thought I'd tease an intern by pretending to be cross and asking him why he had so obviously chosen to ignore our stated work's opening hours. Realistically speaking, it's kind of flexible so long as you're in by about 9:30 and work 8h. The kid started to stammer and before I could explain I was joking, he haltingly blurted out that he'd basically inadvertently sharted himself in his car en route and had to take a quick detour back home to change and wash slightly before coming in. He turned bright red and was so obviously trying to stutter his way through a speech he didn't want to make that he completely ignored me trying to be all like, no, don't worry, I was just kidding. I wanted to hug the poor child as the first of his tears rolled down his cheeks, which was what finally truly convinced me he wasn't pulling a fast one. I told him to go ahead and not only take the time to get composed, but if we wasn't feeling well to avail himself of a sick day and get better if he needed to. I'm sure at least he thought I was a mean bee for making him confess to that, but I was just trying to be silly and fit in. Haha, that always backfires on me. It's easier to just be cold and distant than to fake being normal and get something wrong. Every single day when I really want to be petty or immature, I always have to remind myself this because all it will lead to is unneeded and preventable strife. That one time a guest checking in was upset because I had an accent, so for them I didn't speak. American racism is usually the result of deep ignorance. I was playing a soccer game, the other team kicked a ball up and over our defense for one of their attackers, but one of my teammates reached out and swatted it out of the air. The other team asked the ref to show a yellow card to my teammate for the tactical nature of the handball. But the ref have one of the greatest one-liners I've ever heard. You have to earn a yellow card. You don't get one for being stupid. My ex calmly asked me if I watch P, then flipped out, tried to interrogate me about it, and demanded I give it up when I told her I watched. In the course of the conversation, I asked some questions and found out that she had encountered P in a relationship before and that she had no issue with our sex life. She just didn't like me watching P. She had already exhibited some issues with being controlling, and she admitted that she overreacts. This 29-year-old woman who has had multiple LTRs, has been engaged, has been polyamorous, and has encountered P before basically throws a tantrum and demands input in how I masturbate after very calmly asking about my habits. 7 months in, this was literally the first time P had been discussed. It just felt really contrived, like she orchestrated it to force a compliant reaction on my end. I partly got that read because of how she seemed to deflate when I didn't have any reaction at all. She was screaming and crying, and I'm discussing P like I'm talking about the weather, and eventually, she stops, calms down for a moment and goes, somewhat angrily, "Why aren't you comforting me? Do you even care that I'm upset?" First, I realized I didn't. Second, it really seemed like she was trying to get a reaction and test my willingness to comply. So, I dumped her. After the fact, I found out that she had some mental illnesses she was actively hiding from me. So then, I understood her reaction and behavior as part of her mental illness, as opposed to some sort of malicious play on her part. I did consider her hiding her illness fairly malicious, though, so based on that, I've decided not to be involved with her on any level. I'd say a good 50% of my teenage years, my mother made some grave errors with me from the age of 11 to 18, which at the time I thought meant that I was a bad, hard to manage child that needed constant discipline. I realize now that most of my mom's parenting came from a place of self-centered childishness, not malice. I don't think that absolves her of any responsibility, but I feel less like a monster. One of the times I quit smoking, in the McDonald's breakfast line. It was the third day, which is supposed to be the hardest. They say if you can make it through the third day, you can make it through all the others. I was waiting in line around 9 AM, sweating from irritability, craving a McGriddles. A middle-aged guy came in and stood kind of in front of me and the kid called him forward to order. I jumped forward and said, "Excuse me, excuse me. I was here first. It's my turn to order." Then I looked over at the guy and he looked baffled. Then back to the kid and he looked baffled too. I said, "Give me a you know what, never mind. Frick it, never mind," and walked out. I was so mad at him for stealing my place and I thought the kid at the register ignored me on purpose. But after that scene, I was confident I'd have anus fingers preparing my McGriddles with a lodgy under the bun. Nicotine withdrawal is like that for me, though. I always thought people were being crappy on purpose. I lost my oldest daughter to trisomy 18 when she was 6 days old. One college acquaintance sent me a message that she could understand how I felt because her dog is her baby and if he died she would be beside herself. I get it. People try to connect with shared experiences, but in the depths of my grief, it hurt. As someone who used to work in retail pharmacy, far too many years, and as someone who has met far too many internet-educated socialized PPL, it's become my humble opinion that if PPL have the audacity to treat other PPL like they are less than, without compassion, sound logic, decency, sensitivity, or consideration, they must be stupid. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. My first big breakup as a teen. I stewed in that crap forever and attributed so much malice to him. We were best friends and he fricked that right up. Then we saw each other at a party after a year of not seeing each other and he was drunk and so happy to see me and it suddenly hit me, "You're just a stupid boy," and it felt like I was free from all the crap that breakup had put on me. Sounds dumb but that was a big moment for me. TBH. Most of the times I've been bullied. Obviously there are tons of situations where people are being jerks on purpose, and also just being stupid doesn't invalidate how much it hurts. But yeah, a lot of people picking on me was people like not understanding something and thinking they were under attack when they were not, or not understanding that picking on me wasn't going to change whatever made them unhappy. I was pressured into giving my brother my bike because I wasn't using it that much. I never saw that bike again and thought he sold that bike for profit for years. Apparently he left it outside most of the time and never gave it any maintenance. Eventually it just fell apart. He could have reimbursed me or my parents. It wasn't a scheme, just neglect. There's a real culture of blame at my job. Things go ever so slightly wrong numerous times a day, and since the people there are largely overworked, underpaid, and it's quite a stressful, deadline-driven environment, there is a tendency to jump straight to "I can't believe they've done this again. Why do they keep on doing it that way when they know it causes problems?" I find myself having to point out Hanlon's razor quite often while establishing whether the employee in question is, in fact, purposefully and maliciously making mistakes in order to disrupt the day of a colleague they dislike, unlikely, or whether it was merely just a genuine mistake from someone who, as it usually turns out, hasn't been properly trained. Not quite ignorant on their part, admittedly, just a matter of not realizing it needed to be done in a very specific way to minimize follow-up work. Never attribute to stupidity that which is adequately explained by reasonable people following the incentives they are presented with. Time where it didn't ring true. I kept assuming that my ex was just stupid and didn't understand how mean he was. Turned out he was actually freaking with my head and constantly lying to me, and he ended up admitting that he would actively blame me for things even though he knew it wasn't my fault. It's okay to give someone the benefit of the doubt at first, but once something becomes a pattern, and it's affecting your mental and then physical health, it's okay to admit they're doing it on purpose and are just an butthole. I'm just saying it because you see it a lot, especially in dating. One partner pleads ignorance, but never changes their harmful behavior after being talked to. You think they just don't understand you when the truth is really, they do understand you. They just like the way things are, being able to be buttholes and never facing repercussions. So this is just a shout out to all the people trying to brush truly harmful and even abusive behavior under the rug, because the other person acts like they don't know better. Sort of counter to the purpose of the thread, but it's good to have. There are always people out there pretending to be innocent when really they actually are purposefully malicious. A girl told me I would be really pretty if I cut my hair, wore makeup, and bought new clothes. She legit thought she was being helpful. It comes up a lot when I'm talking politics with some right-voting friends and family. These are generally good people who have never fundamentally acted in a homophobic way towards me, yet they support politicians who either fight against LGBT equality, fund groups that do so, or support candidates who promise to do so. So when it's my tendency to call what they are doing homophobic, which it really is, it needs to have more nuance than that. These people, in my life, have never been a part of a politically marginalized group and do not understand the far-reaching ramifications of their votes. So my conversations with them take patience and understanding on my part of why GOP messaging has led them to feel marginalized and why they feel that way after years of Obama working with minorities. When a stupid hick pulled into our driveway the other day to congratulate my husband on how well he has me trained because I was out doing yard work. WTFOO. Somewhere I used to work, however I changed the quote to end with, comma except at place of work, in which case it will be both. A cook clogged the kitchen sink by dumping dehydrated potatoes, then attempted to flush them. Guess who had to clean that grease trap? If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.